It's actually quite interesting, isn't it? South Africa, with its really complex history, has this dedicated military intelligence division, a story that goes back quite a way.
It really does, and that's what we're diving into today. The Defense Intelligence Division of the SANDF, the South African National Defense Force, basically trying to understand the intelligence engine behind their military.
Exactly. We've got some good source material here, tracing it from the beginning, how it changed, what it does now.
Yeah, the idea is to give you a clear picture of this key part of South Africa's security setup, without getting lost in all the jargon.
Right. So let's kick off. Where did South Africa's military intelligence efforts sort of first begin?
Well, initially, you have to remember South Africa was a dominion in the British Empire, so they didn't really have their own independent setup.
Oh, okay.
They were mainly relying on, well, British intelligence, MI6.
So plugged into the British system, basically.
Yeah.
When did they start thinking, okay, we need our own thing?
The first real step, you could say, was back in 1937. They formed something called the Directorate Operations and Intelligence.
Within the Union Defense Force.
That's right. It was like an internal starting point, addressing their own specific needs.
A first move towards doing it themselves?
Yeah.
What drove that, do you think? Was it just changing defense needs or maybe wanting less reliance on London?
It was likely a bit of both. I mean, a growing sense they needed their own experts looking at their regional issues. Relying only on an outside power, well, it might not always fit perfectly with national interests, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so this directorate gets set up in 37. When did it really start to gain some serious traction?
A really key moment was February 1957. The defense minister at the time, Franz Erasmus, basically gave the directorate the full job collecting and interpreting military intelligence.
Ah, so taking ownership.
Exactly, a big step towards autonomy in that field.
So moving from just getting info to actively gathering and analyzing it, what was the next big structural jump?
That would be July 1st, 1962. The intelligence section got upgraded, essentially. Became a full directorate, the Directorate Military Intelligence, or DMI.
DMI, okay. And that sounds like it signals a growing importance.
Definitely. It shows military intelligence was becoming, a more central piece of the defense puzzle.
And this DMI, it wasn't just operating on its own, was it? I saw something about a state security committee.
Right. From 1963, DMI was part of that committee. They were sitting at the table with the Department of Foreign Affairs and the South African Police Service.
Interesting. So sharing information,
Yeah.
coordinating.
Yeah, it points to how national security intelligence was already seen as needing integration, even back then. Different parts of the government needed to talk.
Makes sense. So you've got the directorate talking strategy. What about the people doing the actual intelligence work on the ground?
Well, that led directly to forming the South African Military Intelligence Corps. That was January 1st, 1968. It got the official okay the next month.
A dedicated corps.
Exactly. A proper professional branch within the military focused specifically on intelligence work gathering, analysis, all of it.
Okay, so formalizing the role, making it a career path almost. Then the name changed again a bit later.
Yes, just a couple of years later, in 1970, it became the Military Intelligence Division, BD.
BD, okay.
And then in 71, the leadership got consolidated under a Director General Military Intelligence. These name changes, they often reflect internal tweaks, maybe shifts in focus.
Right, streamlining or adjusting things. So now we have a dedicated division, MED, with a Director General. How did its place in the bigger military picture get more defined?
There was another important shift, April 15th, 1974. The top job title changed again from Director General to Chief Staff Intelligence, or CSI.
CSI.
And crucially, the CSI started reporting directly to the head honcho, the commander of the South African Defense Force.
Wow, straight to the top.
Yeah, that really shows how vital military intelligence was seen by then, placing its chief right there advising the overall commander.
Definitely sends a message. Now, you can't have an effective intelligence unit without proper training. How did that develop?
They recognized that need pretty early. They set up an intelligence center, interestingly, at the old Radcliffe Observatory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that center grew. It became a formal unit on November 2nd, 1983.
Gaining status.
Exactly. And then it was officially named the South African Military Intelligence College. So a clear commitment to, building expertise from within.
A dedicated college just for intelligence training.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Who were some of the key leaders guiding all this during those years?
Well, the records show people like Colonel Enthused, JIs, starting back in 61, and you can see the job titles change with
Hmm?
the structure Chief Intelligence Officer, then Director Military Intelligence, then Chief of Staff Intelligence.
Following the evolution we discussed.
Precisely. Others mentioned are Brig Pierre Moritz Retief, Major General F.W. Lutz, LT General H.W. Dutoit, right up to LT General C.P. Vanner Vesriesen, who finished his term in March 1994. These were the guys steering the ship, so to speak.
Good to put some names to the history.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the division developed its own sort of identity, too. A motto, mascot.
It did, yeah. Up until 94, the motto was Vigilans et Sciens.
Which means?
Vigilant and knowing. Pretty fitting, right? And their mascot was the owl symbol of wisdom, watchfulness.
Classic intelligence symbol.
Right. And they had colors, too. Black, white, and yellow. All part of building that distinct organizational culture.
Okay, so we've seen this organization, MB or CSI, grow and mature right through a really significant chunk of South African history. Then comes 1994. Huge changes. What happened then?
April 27th, 1994. That's the date. It's when the Defense Intelligence Divisions, as we know it now, SANDF-ID, or just Defense Intelligence, was formally established.
In the New South Africa.
Exactly. This wasn't just putting new label on the door. It was a fundamental part of restructuring the entire defense force within a completely new democratic context.
And this new Defense Intelligence, SANDF-ID, it wasn't operating alone, presumably. How does it fit into the wider intelligence community post-apartheid?
Right. It became part of a bigger picture. Our source mentions several key players. There's NICOC, the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee. Their job is basically to make sure everyone's working together.
The coordinator?
Yeah. Then you've got the NIA, the National Intelligence Agency, mostly focused on domestic security threats, and SAS, the South African Secret Service, looking outwards, gathering foreign intelligence.
Okay, so domestic, foreign.
And then there's also the Crime Intelligence Division within the police, SAPS, dealing with, well, crime-related intelligence. So SANDF-ID fits in as the military intelligence piece of that puzzle.
A more specialized yet connected system. And who's been in charge of this post-94 Defense Intelligence Division?
The list starts with LT Gen DR Verbeek from 94 to 99. Then LT Gen MM Motau took over.
Okay.
Interestingly, LT and General Abel Shilabane's time had a gap, looks like between 2011 and 2012. LT and General Jeremiah Mduduzi Nyembe also served as chief.
Right.
And the current chief, as of the info we have, is LT Gen Thalita Mexicado. She took command on June 1st, 2021.
Important to see that leadership continuity, especially through all the changes. So finally, what does defense intelligence actually do today? What are its main jobs now?
Well, according to our source, the roles listed are pretty modern. First, cyber warfare. That's huge now. Obviously, digital defense, potentially offense, too.
A key domain?
Absolutely. Then just broader intelligence, the whole cycle of collecting, analyzing, and sharing military-related info.
The core business.
Right. And finally, the more traditional field stuff, surveillance, target acquisition, and reconnaissance, ISR, as they often call it.
Okay, so a mix of classic intel and cutting-edge cyber focus. Let's sort of wrap this up then. We've followed this thread from reliance on Britain through the apartheid-era MIDCSI to today's SANDI-ID in the New South Africa.
Yeah, with defined roles, including cyber, ISR, it's quite a journey.
Yeah.
And that 1994 transition is clearly a massive turning point.
Definitely. And understanding that history really helps you grasp where South Africa is coming from in terms of its security thinking today, doesn't it? And how it deals with the world.
Exactly. It's not just old dates and names. It gives context to their current posture and challenges.
Yeah, it makes you think, How does an intelligence agency like this keep evolving? Especially now, with global threats changing so fast, cyber threats everywhere, what challenges are waiting for them down the road?
That's the big question, isn't it? How do they adapt next? Definitely something to ponder.